What if I told you that one throw at Brown's OTAs may have completely changed the direction of Cleveland's future? Not because it was the longest pass, not because it was the most spectacular highlight you'll ever see, but because it exposed something that the Browns organization may not be ready to admit publicly. For months, the conversation in Cleveland has revolved around one man, Deshaun Watson, the former superstar quarterback carrying one of the largest contracts in NFL history, a player the franchise invested everything in, a player ownership desperately wants to see succeed, and a player whose future with the team has become one of the most debated topics in football. But while all eyes were focused on Watson, something unexpected started happening behind the scenes. A rookie began turning heads. Not with flashy interviews, not with social media hype, not with empty promises, but with the one thing that matters most in professional football: performance. And now, after another eye-catching OTA session, people around the league are beginning to ask a question that sounded ridiculous just a few months ago. What if Shedeur Sanders is actually ahead of schedule? What if the quarterback competition that Cleveland refuses to officially acknowledge is already leaning in one direction? And perhaps most importantly, what happens if the rookie keeps getting better? Because here's the reality. The Browns aren't just evaluating a young quarterback. They're confronting a decision that could impact the franchise for years to come. On one side sits a veteran with a massive contract, years of experience, and everything to prove. On the other stands a confident rookie carrying enormous expectations, a famous last name, and growing support every time he steps onto the field. The pressure is building. The scrutiny is increasing. And every throw is being analyzed like it's a playoff game. Now, before anyone gets carried away, let's be clear. OTAs don't determine championships. They don't guarantee starting jobs, and they certainly don't tell the entire story. But sometimes they reveal clues. Sometimes they show which players' teammates are gravitating toward. Sometimes they expose confidence, leadership, and instincts that statistics can't measure. And that's exactly why what happened this week has so many people talking. Because the more film that comes out of Brown's camp, the harder it becomes to ignore one possibility. The future Cleveland, imagined for years, may not be the future that's actually unfolding. And what happened next only made the situation even more fascinating. At first glance, it didn't look like a franchise-altering moment. There were no packed stadiums, no national television audience, no playoff implications hanging in the balance. Just another OTA practice in late spring, with players running drills and coaches evaluating talent. But sometimes the biggest stories begin in the smallest moments. The play that's now generating so much discussion started as a routine red zone rep. Shedeur Sanders dropped back, surveyed the field, and fired a pass toward one of his targets near the goal line. The ball arrived exactly where it needed to be: tight coverage, limited space. The kind of throw quarterbacks have to make when defenses get serious inside the 20-yard line. Then something unexpected happened. The intended receiver couldn't secure the catch. For a split second, the play looked destined to end as an incompletion. The ball bounced free and chaos took over. But instead of hitting the turf harmlessly, it found its way into the hands of another Browns player who crossed into the end zone for a touchdown. Immediately, fans started debating what they had witnessed. Was it simply a lucky break? Was it a fortunate bounce that happened to work in Cleveland's favor? Or was there something more important hidden inside the play? The answer depends on what part of the rep you're focusing on. Critics looked at the result and saw an unusual touchdown. Supporters looked at the throw itself. And that's where things get interesting. The placement was there. The timing was there. The confidence was there. Most rookie quarterbacks entering NFL practices are still processing the speed of the game. They're hesitant. They're cautious. They wait for receivers to become completely open before pulling the trigger. Shedeur didn't. He trusted what he saw and delivered the football into a difficult window. That's the detail that caught people's attention. Not the bounce. Not the touchdown. The decision. Because coaches can fix mechanics. They can improve footwork. They can refine technique. But the ability to process information quickly and trust your instincts under pressure is much harder to teach. And according to many observers, that's exactly what showed up on this play. The throw itself may never appear on a season highlight reel. It may not even be remembered a year from now. But inside the Browns facility, moments like these matter more than most fans realize. Every rep is being evaluated. Every decision is being studied. And with one well-placed pass, Shedeur Sanders gave coaches another reason to keep watching. But that throw wasn't the biggest concern for Cleveland's decision-makers. The real problem was what it forced them to think about next. The throw was impressive. But for the Cleveland Browns, that's exactly the problem. Because every successful rep from Shedeur Sanders creates a question the organization may not want to answer. For the past several years, the Browns have been tied to one of the most expensive decisions in NFL history. When they committed a fully guaranteed $230 million contract to Deshaun Watson, they weren't just acquiring a quarterback. They were making a statement. This was supposed to be the face of the franchise. The player who would finally solve Cleveland's decades-long quarterback problem. The investment was massive. The expectations were even bigger. And now, whether the organization wants to admit it or not, those expectations are colliding with reality. That's why the Browns continue to be extremely careful with their messaging. Listen closely to what coaches and executives say publicly. You'll notice a pattern. Nobody wants to call this a quarterback competition. Nobody wants to suggest that Watson's position is under immediate threat. Nobody wants to create headlines that could turn training camp into a daily controversy. But actions often reveal more than words. Because while the public message remains cautious, Shedeur Sanders continues receiving opportunities that are difficult to ignore. He's getting meaningful reps. He's working with players expected to contribute this season. And most importantly, he's creating conversations every time new practice footage emerges. That's not the profile of a quarterback being hidden away for development. That's the profile of someone being evaluated very carefully. And that creates an uncomfortable situation for everyone involved. Imagine you're part of the Browns' front office. If Watson regains his previous form, your investment looks justified. If he struggles and the rookie outperforms him, the pressure to make a change becomes impossible to avoid. Either way, the spotlight gets brighter with every practice. And here's where things become even more complicated. The fan base is paying attention. Many supporters have spent years waiting for signs of hope at the quarterback position. When they see a young player making confident throws and displaying leadership traits, excitement naturally follows. That excitement can grow fast, much faster than organizations can control. Suddenly, every highlight becomes a debate. Every practice report becomes a headline. Every positive development raises expectations. And the Browns know exactly how dangerous those expectations can become. Because if Shedeur Sanders keeps building momentum, Cleveland may soon face a decision far bigger than a simple depth chart adjustment. They may have to decide whether the future they paid for is the same future they actually want. And that's where this story takes an even more fascinating turn. The deeper coaches study Shedeur Sanders, the less this conversation becomes about a single throw. Because one good pass can be luck. A consistent pattern is something entirely different. What has people inside and outside the organization paying attention isn't necessarily his arm strength or his last name. It's the collection of smaller traits that tend to separate long-term starters from talented prospects. The first thing that stands out is confidence. Not arrogance. Not showmanship. Confidence. There's a difference. Many rookie quarterbacks arrive in the NFL trying not to make mistakes, They're afraid of throwing interceptions, afraid of upsetting coaches, afraid of losing opportunities. As a result, they play cautiously. Shedeur doesn't seem wired that way. When he sees a window, he attacks it. When the defense presents an opportunity, he trusts himself enough to make the throw. That mindset is difficult to teach and even harder to develop under pressure. But confidence alone doesn't impress NFL coaches. Decision-making does. And that's another area where Shedeur continues, generating positive reviews. Quarterbacks must process enormous amounts of information in seconds. Coverage rotations, defensive disguises, pressure packages, route developments, all while maintaining composure inside a collapsing pocket. The faster a quarterback can process those details, the faster an offense can operate. Observers at Browns practices have repeatedly pointed to Shedeur's ability to stay calm and work through his reads without appearing rushed. That's a major reason why coaches continue giving him opportunities. Then there's leadership. This may be the hardest trait to measure, but players know it when they see it. Quarterbacks don't become leaders because they're assigned the title. They become leaders because teammates naturally respond to them. Throughout his football journey, from high school to college and now the NFL, one thing has followed Shedeur almost everywhere he goes. Players seem to believe in him. That doesn't guarantee success. But it matters. Especially in a locker room, searching for stability, the most important position in sports. And then there's the trait that may matter most of all. Poise. The ability to remain calm when everything around you becomes chaotic. The NFL has ended the careers of countless talented quarterbacks who possessed elite physical tools, but couldn't handle pressure when the lights got brightest. So far, Shedeur appears comfortable in those moments. And that's why this story keeps growing. Because every practice reveals another small detail. Another reason for coaches to pay attention. Another reason for fans to get excited. And another reason why the quarterback battle everyone keeps denying may be far more real than anyone wants to admit. But despite all the praise, there's one criticism Shedeur still can't escape, and his doubters aren't letting anyone forget it. For all the excitement surrounding Shedeur Sanders, not everyone is convinced. In fact, some scouts and analysts are pointing to the exact same concern they had before he ever arrived in Cleveland. Turnovers. More specifically, the decisions that occasionally put the football in harm's way. Now, to be fair, this isn't some newly discovered issue. It's something evaluators discussed throughout his college career. While many praised his accuracy, toughness, and ability to deliver under pressure, others questioned whether he sometimes trusted his arm a little too much. The concern wasn't that he lacked talent. The concern was that he believed he could make every throw. And for young quarterbacks, that can be both a gift and a curse. Some of the league's biggest stars built their careers on aggressive decision-making. They attacked tight windows. They challenged defenders. They trusted their instincts. But that same approach can also lead to costly mistakes when the competition gets faster and the windows get smaller. NFL defenders don't miss many opportunities. A throw that becomes a completion in college can quickly become a turnover on Sundays. That's why some critics remain cautious. They want to see how Shedeur responds when defenses begin disguising coverages. They want to see how he handles complex blitz packages. They want proof that he can balance aggression with discipline. And honestly, those are fair questions. Every rookie quarterback enters the league with areas that need refinement. The difference is that Shedeur's strengths have attracted so much attention that his weaknesses are being scrutinized even more closely. That's the reality of being a highly discussed prospect. Every successful throw becomes a headline. Every mistake becomes an argument. Every interception during practice gets replayed online and analyzed from 10 different angles. The spotlight never turns off. But here's what makes this criticism interesting. Many of the concerns being discussed today are the same concerns that surrounded several successful NFL quarterbacks early in their careers. The challenge isn't eliminating risk entirely. The challenge is learning when to take it. And that's where coaching, experience, and repetition become crucial. Because nobody expects Shedeur Sanders to be a finished product today. The Browns simply need to determine whether the mistakes are part of a learning curve or signs of a larger issue. So far, the evidence remains incomplete. But while critics continue debating his flaws, another storyline is quietly developing behind the scenes. And it involves the man currently standing between Shedeur Sanders and the starting job. The most fascinating part of this entire story may not be what's happening on the practice field. It may be what's being discussed behind closed doors. Because while coaches continue evaluating quarterbacks and players continue competing for roster spots, the conversation surrounding Deshaun Watson refuses to go away. And that's understandable. Few players in recent NFL history have faced the level of scrutiny Watson has experienced over the last several years. Every throw is analyzed. Every interview is dissected. Every practice report generates debate. As a result, speculation has become almost impossible to avoid. Now, it's important to separate facts from rumors. The facts are straightforward. Watson remains one of the most accomplished quarterbacks on Cleveland's roster. At his peak, he was considered among the league's elite playmakers, capable of extending plays and making throws very few quarterbacks could attempt. Those abilities don't simply disappear overnight. However, reports and discussions around the team continue raising questions about his future. Some observers believe the relationship between Watson and portions of the fan base has become difficult to repair. Others have suggested that years of injuries, criticism, and constant pressure may have changed the overall dynamic surrounding his tenure in Cleveland. To be clear, these are opinions and theories circulating among analysts and fans, not confirmed facts. But the conversation itself is revealing. Because whenever a franchise quarterback becomes the subject of this much uncertainty, people naturally begin wondering what comes next. And that's where things get complicated. Watson isn't fighting to prove he can throw a football. Everyone already knows he can. He's fighting to prove he can still be the player Cleveland believed it was getting. That's a completely different challenge. The expectations attached to him are enormous. Every successful practice is viewed as evidence of a comeback. Every setback becomes a national storyline. Few players in the league are operating under that kind of microscope. And yet, despite all the attention surrounding Watson, something unexpected keeps happening. The spotlight continues drifting toward Shedeur Sanders. Not because Watson is disappearing, but because the rookie keeps giving people new reasons to talk. That shift in attention may not seem significant today. But inside NFL organizations, momentum matters. Perception matters. And confidence inside a locker room matters even more. Which is why the Browns are paying close attention to something that many fans may be overlooking. Because if this roster is as talented as some believe, the quarterback decision could become far more important and far more urgent than anyone expected just a few months ago. Lost in all the quarterback headlines is a reality that could completely change this conversation. The Cleveland Browns may actually have a better roster than most people realize. And if that's true, the pressure to find the right quarterback becomes even greater. Think about it. Quarterback battles are one thing, but quarterback battles on teams capable of competing right now, those are entirely different. Because every decision suddenly carries consequences. And that's exactly what Cleveland appears to be facing. Start with the running game. The Browns have quietly assembled a group of backs capable of creating problems for opposing defenses in multiple ways. There is speed, power, versatility, and depth. More importantly, there are players who can take pressure off whichever quarterback ultimately wins the job. That's a huge advantage for a young passer. A strong running attack forces defenses to respect play action, creates manageable third downs, and prevents quarterbacks from feeling like they need to win games by themselves. But the backfield isn't the only reason for optimism. The pass-catching group has started generating attention as well. Young receivers continue developing, while several tight ends have reportedly impressed coaches throughout off-season activities. In today's NFL, tight ends are no longer just blockers. They're matchup nightmares. A reliable tight end can become a quarterback's best friend, especially for a rookie learning the speed of the professional game. Then there's the coaching factor. Talent only matters if it's used correctly. And that's where Cleveland believes it may have an advantage. The offensive staff appears committed to building a system that creates easier throws, better matchups, and more opportunities for players to succeed after the catch. Modern NFL offenses aren't just about having stars. They're about creating favorable situations. And the Browns seem determined to do exactly that. What's most interesting is how all of these pieces fit together. A productive running game, developing receiving weapons, improving depth, creative coaching. Those aren't the ingredients of a rebuilding team. Those are the ingredients of a roster expecting to compete. Which brings us back to the quarterback situation. Because if Cleveland truly believes this roster can win now, patience becomes much harder to justify. The organization can't afford to waste opportunities waiting for answers. They need the best player under center. Not the most expensive player. Not the most famous player. The best player. And that's why the next phase of this story could become the most important of all. Because sooner or later, the Browns will have to make a choice. And that choice could define the future of the franchise for years to come. At some point, the debates end. The speculation stops. The practice clips no longer matter. And the Cleveland Browns will be forced to make a decision. A real decision. Not a public relations statement. Not a carefully worded coach-speak answer. A decision that could shape the franchise for years. Because eventually, someone has to take the first snap when the games start counting. And whoever wins that job will instantly become one of the most discussed players in football. If Deshaun Watson earns the position, the Browns will be betting that experience, talent, and familiarity outweigh the excitement surrounding the rookie. They'll be betting that the player they invested so heavily in can still deliver at a high level and justify their commitment. It's a path that offers stability, but it also comes with enormous pressure. Because every mistake would immediately trigger questions about whether the wrong choice was made. Every interception, every loss, every offensive struggle. The comparisons would be unavoidable. But if Shedeur Sanders wins the job, the risks are entirely different. Suddenly, Cleveland would be handing the keys to a rookie quarterback expected to lead a team with legitimate expectations. That's not an easy assignment. Young quarterbacks often experience growing pains. They face defenses more complex than anything they've seen before. They encounter adversity that can't be replicated in practice. The Browns would need to accept those challenges as part of the process. Yet there's also a potential reward. A franchise quarterback on a rookie contract is one of the most valuable assets in professional sports. If Shedeur develops into the player many believe he can become, Cleveland could find itself entering a completely new era. And that's what makes this decision so fascinating. It's not simply about choosing between two quarterbacks. It's about choosing between two timelines. One path is built around proving an investment was worth making. The other is built around embracing a future that may arrive sooner than expected. History is filled with teams that waited too long to make difficult decisions. It's also filled with teams that moved too quickly. Finding the balance is what separates successful organizations from struggling ones. And right now, the Browns are standing directly at that crossroads. The pressure is rising. The competition is intensifying. And with every practice, every throw, and every report emerging from Cleveland, the choice becomes harder to avoid. Because whether the organization is ready or not, the future is coming. And it may arrive much sooner than anyone expected. If there's one thing we've learned from the first stages of Brown's OTAs, it's this. The quarterback situation in Cleveland is far from settled. Despite all the headlines, despite all the assumptions, and despite the attempts to downplay the conversation, the reality is becoming harder to ignore with each passing practice. Shedeur Sanders is making people pay attention. Not because of his last name, not because of social media hype, and not because fans desperately want a new storyline. He's earning attention because every opportunity seems to reveal another reason to believe he belongs. The confidence is there. The poise is there. The decision-making appears to be improving. And perhaps most importantly, he looks increasingly comfortable in an environment that overwhelms many rookie quarterbacks. That doesn't mean he's guaranteed to become the Browns' starter. And it certainly doesn't mean Deshaun Watson is finished. Anyone writing Watson off completely is ignoring reality. This is still a quarterback who has achieved things at the highest level of professional football. If he returns healthy and motivated, there is absolutely a scenario where he reminds everyone why he was once considered among the league's most dangerous players. But that's exactly what makes this story so compelling. Both outcomes remain possible. The veteran could reclaim control of the position. The rookie could accelerate the timeline and force the organization's hand. Right now, nobody knows how it ends. And that's why every practice suddenly feels important. Every report matters. Every highlight sparks another debate. Because beneath all the off-season noise lies a question that Cleveland cannot avoid forever. Who gives this franchise the best chance to win? Eventually, reputation won't matter. Contracts won't matter. Past accomplishments won't matter. The only thing that will matter is what coaches see on the field. And if the Browns are willing to let the competition play out honestly, the answer should reveal itself. Until then, all eyes remain fixed on Berea. A rookie quarterback continues building momentum. A veteran quarterback continues fighting to prove he still belongs. And an entire franchise finds itself standing between its past and its future. Sometimes the most important decisions in sports aren't made under bright stadium lights. Sometimes they begin on quiet practice fields long before the season starts. The Browns may not realize it yet, but the choice they make over the coming months could define the next decade of football in Cleveland. And judging by everything we've seen so far, this story is only getting started. If you made it this far, you already know this story is far from over. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this changes everything, or are people overreacting? Hit the like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. It really helps push videos like this out to more viewers. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because things are moving fast and there's a lot more coming. I want to hear your take. Does this shift the balance, or will defenses find another way to respond? Share this video with someone who needs to see this, especially if they've been following this story closely. Turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when new content drops. If you've got a different perspective, drop it below. I read a lot of the comments and the discussions here are always interesting. Let me know what you think happens next, because this could go in a lot of directions. And if you enjoy content that breaks things down in a simple, engaging way, stick around. There's plenty more on the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.